This is the World Satsanga held on the 29th of April 2017 in conjunction. Welcome to this World Satsanga held on the 15th of January 2025 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and the Kevin Moore Show. And as usual, and in every World Satsanga, I encourage you to visit his YouTube channel, the Kevin Moore Show, where he'll be explaining or getting lots of interviews with different individuals who have different interactions with the greater reality. The lecture in January is going to be really about blending in. One of the major things that people have problems with when they are interacting with people around them and they are progressing through the frequencies, they're ascending the frequencies and becoming more and more exposed to the greater reality, is how they are able to interact with those around them who don't ascend the frequencies. And this can happen within family units, it can happen within friends, it can happen with work colleagues, it can happen with people who we are interacting with from a hobby-based perspective or a sports-based perspective. So if we think about what happens to us, we raise through the frequencies and we start to see people in a completely different light. We start to realise that they're simply a soul, the same as us, experiencing, learning and evolving on behalf of our higher self, our true energetic self, and of course our true energetic self is evolving on behalf of the source, and source is evolving on behalf of the origin. But the thing is that because we start to see people in this light, and that the bodies that their soul is occupying in is just basically a vehicle, similar to us using a motor car or an aeroplane to experience and be able to move around the planet or navigate around the planet and experience the different things we are, then we see them completely as one. And they are one with us because, in essence, our different volumes of sentience, our higher self or our true energetic self and ourselves, the smaller volumes of sentience projected from that, are in essence individualized from source. So in that respect, we are the source because we are just nanoscopic aspects of it. It's a little bit like for instance, the leptons that make up the electrons, neutrons, protons that make up the atoms that make up the cells in our body. It's all part of one big volume of sentience, but it's individualized and has its own role to do. Same as the leptons within the atoms within the cells of our body. The issue we have is that we start to find that as we rise through the frequencies, we notice the difference between ourselves and those around us who don't rise through the frequencies, or even start to drop down the frequencies, because it is significantly easier to drop down the frequencies than it is to ascend the frequencies, because it relies on constant vigilance on how we think, behave and act, how we interact with others, and how we give ourselves time to give a considered response rather than instantaneous shooting from the hip response. Which is what basically those individuals who don't ascend the frequencies will be doing to us. They'll become very aggressive, they'll become very materialistic, they'll become very status orientated, they'll like sensory pleasures, they'll like to be able to show their position in their incarnation, they like to be able to go on expensive holidays, expensive vehicles, houses, jewellery, get expensive restaurants and all these different things because they can, or because they want to, or because they want to follow people who do that. The other issue is that they get angry with us as souls who manage to control their thoughts, behaviours and actions, and therefore ascend the frequencies, because there's a disharmonious effect between their vibrational level, their frequency, and ours. And so we start to find out that we can't interact with them properly because there's always an adversarial content associated with our interactions. So what we have to do to be able to interact with them, because we need to, within our work environments, within our friendships environment, and within our sports or our hobbies environment, is to really create a condition where we can communicate with them on their level, not specifically using bad language, but understanding them on their level, interacting with them on their level, but not becoming part of their level. So we're in the physical, but not of the physical. That's an old saying I've been saying for a long time. We are in the physical, but not of the physical. And in doing so, we're able to communicate with them, we're able to do what we need to do with our role, our job, and also be able to address our responsibilities within those ways in which we need to interact with them in the circumstances and the environments we find those circumstances as well. So we're not being them, we're not dropping our frequencies, we're simply learning how to be capable of interacting with them on their level. Though they will maybe, if they observe the way we think, behave and act, and how happy we are and how content we are in our incarnation, they may start to copy us, which is fine. They may start to see what we're doing and start to want to have this level of joy in their lives, and that's fine. But more often than not, that won't happen. And so for us to be able to blend in with them, we need to be sort of invisible to the differences in our frequencies and the disharmonious effect between their frequency versus ours. Now, we might find that we feel that we're being stabbed in the heart, which is another energetic effect that we have, because we do most of our communication through the heart chakra. But we also might feel that we're in an adversarial environment at times. If we go into a restaurant, for example, or the hostelry of some sort, or a hotel. The thing is, blending in is about adopting the persona of the type of personality where you are interacting with. Again, it doesn't mean that you're going to be using bad language all the time, or drinking too much alcohol, or going into and buying lots of jewelry from jewelers, or expensive clothes from different expensive clothes shops. It means that you're going to be able to walk into these places and interact with those you need to, and then move away. So think of it this way: interact on a level of understanding rather than a level of misunderstanding. And that is another way of blending in. Being part of the environment doesn't mean that you are part of the environment. A long time ago, it's probably about 10 years ago actually, I went to India to do a workshop, and this is an example. And we were going to go through a certain part of Bangalore to be able to go to certain shops to experience certain things. And I was looking at some of the old bicycles that were there, and some of the old British-made leather saddles, because I was interested in how some parts of the British bicycle, so I say business, along with other things, of course, that were British in those days, from the British Raj, was still there. And I was seeing these different things, these different bicycles, and all these different areas. There were shops that were part just a cupboard in the side of the wall. There was bigger shops, there were smaller shops, there were people that were just peddlers on the road with trolleys with things they were selling. I walked through there, and I was the only white face, the only foreigner in the area, and nobody paid any attention to me at all. And that was because I adopted the frequency associated with them. And the person I was with was surprised that I was usually, or a foreigner was usually chased, or usually interacted with to try to sell things. But nobody even touched me, because I was part of the environment. And it's just other people I've seen who said, "Oh, I can't go into that area because people harass me all the time." It's because you're afraid, and you show the difference in frequency, and therefore you become visible. So in becoming part of the environment, by adopting the frequencies of the environment, whilst also making sure that you adopt your own high frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, you blend into the background. So the thought process is to feel that you should be there, to feel that you're part of it, to feel that you are authorised to be there, and that you're part of the background. You're not part of the foreground. And when you do that, you do blend into the environment, and nobody pays any attention to you at all. You could be going through there looking like Genghis Khan, and nobody would notice you because you know you're there. Another example of this is a gentleman who I've been working with in translating my books in Japan. And I'm not going to name the individual, but basically he was wearing traditional Japanese clothes, which is a hakama and a kimono, and he was walking through Cardiff. And he was so confident in being who he was, and knowing that what he was wearing was what he wanted to wear, because he's trying to promote the old Japanese traditions, even in Japan, that he just blended into the background, and nobody paid him the slightest bit of attention. Nobody looked at him, nobody stared, nobody was interested, because he maintained his high frequency. And so this is an example, two examples for us all. One is me being in India looking at bicycle parts and having an interest in the old English bicycle parts versus what's still there being sold and manufactured in India. And the other one was the way my Japanese translator dressed whilst visiting us in Cardiff, and just being totally happy with his own status, his own thought processes, and being who he was, and therefore blending into the background. So for us as spiritual individuals, as metaphysical individuals, or experiencing higher frequency interaction with the greater reality, it's more important for us to recognize that we need to maintain that whilst we're navigating through low frequency environments and interacting with lower frequency individuals, by just being part of it. Being part of it doesn't mean you're of it. It doesn't mean that you need to become a low frequency individual. It just means that you need to understand the way they interact, and interact in a way which is acceptable to them. Okay, so let's move on to the questions and answers. So, Bill's asked the question, in our physical plane, humanity has consistently killed itself throughout the ages, primarily through endless warring upon itself until the present day. Insane behavior seems to be part of the human DNA. Is this the same case for higher frequency physical planes or the non-physical universes? If this behavior is unique to this plane, what does that say about the souls born into this plane who continue to kill each other? It's embarrassing to be part of a race of people in this way. If this is the most pathetic universe stroke physical plane of the 397 universes, will it always be such, or does it eventually evolve into something less pathetic? And if there's no time but only event space, maybe all states of this plane are occurring simultaneously. Well, to answer the last part of the question, the answer is yes. All different versions of what we could be at this level are in fact current. It's just that we tend to focus on this particular aspect of event space because we don't have the communicative bandwidth for the frequency to interact from the higher perspective. But also, we are going to change eventually, and we will eventually become more individually, shall we say, mature and law abiding and more higher frequency in our thoughts, behaviors, and actions. And that's basically illustrated in one of the lectures I gave before Christmas, called the road to collectivism, where we start to no longer need to have individual governments or individuals above governments to show us the way and lead the direction. We collectively lead the direction because we individually make decisions that we consider everybody else first, including the environment and those around us, and the greater perspective of those in the rest of the civilization we're part of, before we actually make that hard decision and go down the action route. So it is disturbing right now, but it's part of our awakening process. Part 2 is, remind me please, does an aspect of a true energetic self only incarnate in this plane? Higher frequency physical planes, non-physical universes, is the aspect basically trying to escape this plane by experiencing, learning, and evolving over successive incarnations? Does this mean that those of us who are here have a lot of catching up to do with the majority of the souls in the multiverse? No, our true energetic selves project smaller individualized units of its own sentience, i.e. the soul, into all sorts of different frequencies associated with the physical universe and other universes within the multiverse as well. So we don't just come here, although this is an evolutionary accelerant for obvious reasons, because of the low communicative bandwidth and the almost total lack of communication between ourselves here and our higher selves. We do go everywhere else. And in fact, part of the question that Bill's answered in his first question was, does this behavior happen in the higher frequencies of the physical universe? And the answer is no. The higher up the frequencies we go, the more aware of what we are, and our roles are apparent. So from that perspective, the higher up the frequencies we go, the more consistent we are in understanding our collectiveness rather than our individuality and the selfish aspects of how we think, behave, and act. So it's so basically the true energetic self itself is not limited to projecting smaller
versions of itself or souls into other locations within the multiverse. And the next question is, assuming when the body dies, we do not reincarnate immediately, who do we interact with when we're non-physical? Our trinity self, other disincarnate aspects, teachers, source entity, Jesus, etc. At what point in the reincarnation cycle do we re-emerge with our trinity self, or re-merge, I should say? Well, the Anne Dialogues goes over quite a lot of this information in a different way to what is broadcast in other texts. But in essence, we interact with our guides and helpers. We understand how the incarnation went, what we tried to experience versus what we did experience, how well the communication between the guide and helpers was, and whether or not there's a need for us to experience other things again because of karma, to try and detach from them, whether we can progress into understanding or experiencing other levels of experiencing different frequencies, different locations, and different aspects of the multiverse. And so it's quite a long, lengthy process. We call this like the debriefing process, or the life review. There's all sorts of different ways of describing it, but in essence, we go through and understand what we've experienced and how we've interacted with those guides and helpers, and what what we've what we think has been successfully as well. And bear in mind that success is not specifically black and white. It could be that we've experienced enough, even though we want to experience the whole of something, it could be experienced enough of it to make it worthwhile, and therefore we can move on. And the last question is, can you remind us who created our universe, and the planet Earth in particular, and all the universes for that matter? Was it our source entity, or was it after the source entity created the true energetic cells and other entities? The multiverse and the physical universe itself was initially created slightly before the individualization of its own values of sentience to create our true energetic selves. So in that instance, it created its alternative structure of space, that part of itself which it segmented, which is the first three levels of structure, and not the fourth, which is reserved for itself. And once it had done that, it then divided or created lots of separate smaller divisions or individualizations of sentience to populate those areas and those levels of structure. The universe is within the multiverse that is part of that individualized volume of space that we now know as being the frequencies, subdimensional components, and full dimensions that created the multiverse. Okay, now I think we've got some more questions here. Let's have a look at the chat here. Okay. Right, Ula's got an interesting comment from Ula. I think she knows the book I'm working on next. One channel said, Hitler's soul is still in hell of his own making. Is he just tapping into that particular event space, not realizing that Hitler's soul has already done it, a life review, and moved on? The aspect of sentience that was Hitler is fully conversant with what it was part of, what the experience learns evolve. And it's actually quite a highly evolved soul. And it's generally very evolved souls that take on significant levels of aggression or anxiety against them. So not only do yogis take on board lots of negativity to absorb it and help their students rise to the frequencies, but sometimes souls create a condition where we start to look at what's happening and collectively decide that this isn't the way we're supposed to be going. And the soul that is Hitler was one of those. And there's other souls as well that have done similar things around the world. And the one book that I'm working on now is looking at the different Antichrist figures and trying to understand what their roles and responsibilities are. And whether it's actually, although it looks like a negative thing from a human perspective, whether there's actually some positives in there as well, in terms of how we interact with each other in a more mature way. Part two of this, is there a particular signature or core to a soul personality that carries over from lifetime to lifetime? Or is it purposefully changed in every lifetime to create more diversity within that soul personality? In essence, the individualized volume of sentience that we call a soul maintains its knowledge base or experiential content and its subsequent evolutionary content as a function of what it experiences. And that's passed on to the true energetic self, and it can be absorbed in totality as a function of different types of communion that a soul might enter into with its true energetic self. But in essence, we only develop this other personality called the ego as a function of incarnation, because we lose the communicative bandwidth associated with instantaneous omnipresent communication with our true energetic self by coming down to lower frequencies and having almost nothing. And that creates the body association that our soul has, and where we start to consider ourselves as being the body rather than being a highly evolved volume of sentience. And so there is a core part of us which is there, but there's also a part of us which knows what we want to experience. And we tend to pick this up intuitively, with good feelings about doing this or doing that. And the thing we want to be specializing in. Some people want to be specialized as doctors or researchers or scientists or engineers, or want to experience being a carer or a health worker or an evolutionary warrior, those sorts of things, or even just do nothing, can be homeless. So we have different ways in which we experience things, and I suppose the sort of the part of us that wants to experience these things is still there. So in essence, there is, yes, but the personality that's presented can be a function of a higher frequency incarnation. So there's a bit more of the sentience and the knowledge base that's associated with that soul comes through as well. So it's a bit of both, really. Okay, next one, 3. Does one soul like Hitler or the Antichrist specialize in certain roles and challenges based upon certain wounds over its evolutionary path, or do all souls take turns to play similar or same roles? We all do enter into various different roles. We can be paupers, we can be scientists, we can be great leaders, we can be kings, queens, we can be anything. But in terms of some of the bigger roles, where there's a significant amount of, shall we say, interest in us, or observational interest, or souls want to be part of it or are controlled by us, they're a different type. And specifically as with the Hitler soul, there needs to be a very high level of evolution associated with that soul, so they can take on board the negativity that's projected towards them, so they can deflect it whilst still being able to do their role. And basically they know what they've done as soon as they've finished their incarnation. So it's quite an important thing to note. And it's a very brave soul that goes down the road of trying to help us understand each other and become more mature by creating an antagonistic focus towards us in some way. Okay. Eliza says, Happy New Year to us all. I almost said happy birthday there. Question: can we have incarnations above the level of our true energetic self? Short answer is no, because that is the incarnation is basically a function of becoming in the physical universe. And so the highest frequency we can go into the physical universe is the 12th frequency. So we can never incarnate into a level above the 13th, but above the 12th, basically. We can we can be individualized into the same frequency associated with the true energetic self, but not actually incarnate. And how many incarnations does it typically take to go up a frequency level? What does it depend upon? It depends upon how accurate we are in experiencing what we want to experience and how efficient we accrue the evolutionary content associated with it. It can take one soul 75 lives collectively with the other souls that are projected from their true energetic self, or it can take thousands. Just depends upon how well we're doing, really, collectively. Not just us as a soul, but also the other souls that are associated with our true energetic self. So it can be quick and it can be slow. It just depends on what we're doing and how we're doing it and how well we're doing it. Okay. So that's a thing. The next question is: do electrons travel between multiple universes? This is from Jagdot. Sorry. Do electrons travel between multiple universes? That is what the scientists are theorizing about quantum computing, and that the calculations are being made in parallel universes on these new quantum computers. Well, the quantum computers themselves don't do anything much than just operate on a very fast level by using very nanoscopic levels of processing power or switching power. The only way to connect with and get rapid computations to use the whole universe as a computer. And that's in the book on the arm. It tells what true quantum computing would be. Because if you think about it, if we could tap into event space in reality as a way of finding out the answers to questions or understanding things, then we'll be tapping into everything now, the true value of nowness. And so there wouldn't be a need to compute anything because we're just tapping into the answer. And that would be the fastest way. So electrons don't travel between multiple universes because they're a function of the physical universe. So that's what it is. Things like teleportation are based upon duplication, based upon some function of understanding that there's entanglement between different particles in the same universe, but in vastly different locations. But if we consider that actually the physical universe is part of event space, or event space is also part of the physical universe, and that everything in the physical universe has got something called quantum latency, and that quantum latency has the capability of, or creates the capability of being anything in totality at once. So my pen, for example, could be a motor car, or it could be a spaceship, or it could be a galaxy, because it is a galaxy. It has like, it's all there at once, but we just focus on it being a pen, and that's one of the things that might be worthwhile considering as a theoretical scientist as to how we can move forwards and thinking in that way, working with event space, not with quantum physicality. Eliza says, can you go back over what you said about incarnations beyond the physical universe, e.g., the first dimension? Do we incarnate into every frequency above the physical universe, or do we bounce around in a non-linear, non-hierarchical way? The answer is we can dance around in a non-linear, non-hierarchical way, but we have to experience everything. So we have to experience every universe and every circumstance and every environment within every universe that is available to us. The function of experiencing everything can be achieved either in a linear way or in a completely random way. And we tend to do it in a random way because we like to be able to move around and understand. And sometimes we fill the gaps in. So sometimes we create an efficient condition where we understand something, even though we haven't experienced it, because it's a function of triangulation, of evolutionary triangulation. And therefore we can understand something instantaneously, even though we've not had to go through the painful process of learning it in a linear way. Eliza said, do you understand why many of the spiritual community see Trump as God's guy? I find it a bit confusing. Yes, I have a number of clients who think the same. Basically, there's two thought processes. One is an agitator. He's making us see ourselves and making us see that the way in which he's behaving and the way people copy as a result of it is not the way forward. We should be more mature. We should be more law-abiding individually. We should be more concerning, more service-orientated, and more collectively considering in what we think, behave, and act. So it's like there's an undercurrent there that they probably don't understand. That it's like a start point, and it's like an irritation that's making us realize we shouldn't be behaving this way, and we shouldn't be allowing individuals who think, behave, and act in this way to be our leaders as well. So it's a start point of collectivism. On the other side, it's showing freedom from being controlled, and people like to be free. Unfortunately, ultimate freedom corrupts ultimately. So we have to consider that we need to have a level of self-governance to be able to move forwards in a mature way. So we have to start to see that both of those things as the answer to the movement forwards, and spiritual people start to see this as being a start of collectivism, but they don't understand what it is. They just see the person there. They don't see the background towards what's going on. So we have to look from our perspective as higher frequency thinkers, so to speak. We have to see behind that thought process, because you tend to find that spiritual people who think of certain leaders as being, the way forwards, and and hallelujah, they're here, is because they don't understand the depth and detail behind it. Okay, next one. Daniel asked the question, why the fires in California? What should we learn? It seems very painful. So part of that is, how are we doing? Do you see progress? Again, the fires are a function of us needing to work together. there's nothing like a good catastrophe to stop us from being individually selfish and other than looters, of course, and creating a community spirit. And same with wars. This is why there's a community spirit in all the people who live in Gaza, unfortunately, and that's why we need to really start to think about how certain leaders are behaving because they're taking the wrong direction. And some people are seeing it as the way forward because they're on a crusade, whereas others are realizing that we shouldn't do this. So in essence, it's all a part. It's all these different things like floods as well, earthquakes, hurricanes, typhoons, tornadoes. All of these different things are there to make us start to not think about ourselves and think about us collectively and work together collectively, and think about, what am I going to do that's going to affect others, and then make the decision about if it's a neutral function to others or beneficial to others. So that's why. So right now we've bottomed out in terms of our progress, and it's we're going to stay bottomed out for quite some time. So let's let's hope that we start to see the bouncing up from the bottom line. Okay, Eliza's got another question here. I've heard it mentioned that you said that we're on the third full evolutionary cycle of Source Entity 1. Is this in one of your books? Can you please explain this, or will there be a fourth cycle, or was a third it? Um, I'm not sure if it's in one of the books. I think it might be in the Origin Speaks. Possibly. I'm looking at the books above me. Um, but basically, the whole function of an evolutionary cycle is the source occupying a volume of structured space that's within the origin, occupying it with its sentience, understanding what the capabilities are and the interaction with other versions or the other volumes of its sentience within that volume of structured space, learning and evolving from it and moving on, and then collecting that sentience back in, becoming whole again. We all commune with source. It detaches that sentience away from that volume of structure space, and then moves back into another volume of structure space and occupies it again, creating another multiverse or something similar or something else. And the whole point is that all the source entities are doing similar things, and the function is that when all the source entities and the origin has understood the level of structured space that we're in now, which is the first group of 12 of the first of the 12 levels of structured space. I said that without tying my tongue too badly. Then we move into the next level. But we each time a source entity occupies a volume of structured space and then moves on, that's an evolutionary cycle basically. And so each evolutionary cycle starts to move faster. So our cycle, which is the third, is moved faster than the second, which moved faster than the first. And the fourth will move significantly faster than the third. And eventually we go through an evolutionary cycle, which is significantly faster than me clicking my fingers. So from our perspective, there's an infinite number of evolutionary cycles, although it's finite in reality. Okay. Daniel says, how and why do these ineffective leaders get elected? What more can we do? Should we vote or not vote? Collectively, we put them there, basically. And in essence, these people they sing a song or create a tune or a rhetoric which is attractive to people, and even if it's a complete lie, it ends up being a complete failure. The individuals that they communicated with believed it because it was on their level. So what we have to understand is, as part of the road to collectivism, is the checksum effect, which is also part of one of my lectures before Christmas. I think the checksum effect and the road to collectivism are in the October, November, and December Satsangas. So look at the lectures for those, and you'll see them. That's the important level of process. The checksum effect is part of the process of going towards the road or starting the road towards collectivism. So it's quite interesting. But basically, we need to realise that what we're being told from these people is not going to happen, or is a complete nonsense or a lie, and therefore we don't vote for them. And the checksum effect is one way of stopping that from happening. I mean, listen to the lecture I give. It's important, and I believe Ula's also transcribed it into the book 5. I believe the Satsanga book 5, so you can find that. It's worth reading. Ula said maybe the problem is too many backfill and backdrop people. They elected Trump. Absolutely. We're about 58% now. We can't get much. We can't go more than 60% ish. around that figure before it becomes unmanageable. So it again, these individuals who are, bless them, they're a different genre of soul, and therefore they're not being given the opportunity of having individualized free will before. So it's like it's consuming them. And the function of that is that they operate in a very selfish way, and they see individuals who can feed their selfishness and give them what they think they should have, what's their given right, so to speak, is what they vote for. And so the energy surrounding the not just the lectures, but the presentations that these people give are absorbed by this level of soul, and they vote for them. As simple as that. Next part of Ella's question: do you see some big event happening this year to stop this craziness around the world? Um, I certainly think that the what's going on in Israel and Gaza is not going to stop. I truly feel that it's going to continue. There's going to be a release of hostages, and then there's going to be more missiles and things. I think there's going to be a complete um, genocide going on, and it's going to affect other places like the Lebanon as well, and Tehran and Iran. I think it's going to be a big problem we've got there. There needs to be a stronger level of understanding within the United Nations as to what's going to happen. So that's the big event I see is that whatever's been agreed over this next couple of days won't really happen. But we might start to recognize collectively that, and things might start to change a bit more. We might start to see more of the individuals, more of the white children start to come slowly out of their hiding places, so to speak, or become more prominent. A bit like Greta Thunberg, you might see Greta Thunberg becoming more prevalent again. So we're going to start to see more leaders come out and become more visible, but not until towards the end of the year. Okay. Daniel's got, because of the density of this environment, we often forget what we should do properly. How can we remember better? Give ourselves a moment to give the considered response. Use our intuition to respond, not our ego or our logic to respond. And that's the only way. It's realize what's wrong and what's right. And it's something we've got inbuilt within us. It's just that a lot of people tend to ignore it. But things like throwing the sweet wrapper or the cigarette out the car window, how often do you see that? Or McDonald's wrappers, the whole thing. We see trash being thrown out of car boots because they can't be bothered to go the extra 2 miles down the road to the refuse collection centre. They've gone out of their houses and they've gone 10 miles down the road. Why can't they make the extra 2 miles? It's because people don't think. And if we give ourselves a time to give the considered response and time to do the right thing, then we'll be much better. And we'll be able to rise up the frequencies and we'll start to remember who and what we are. Okay, Eliza said, I feel like more people are turning within, meditating, becoming more aware. Is it just me? Do you see a percentage increasing? It depends upon where you are in the world, actually, and who you interact with as to whether you start to see more spiritual thought processes becoming prevalent. Certainly around some parts of the world, it's not, but in others it is. And I feel that as long as we can be a good example, then we stand a chance of succeeding and making others see the better way of existing, the better thought processes, the higher thought processes, the thoughts, behaviors, and actions that give us the correct way to exist and be in a mature way. Because only when we have this mature way of existing, and it becomes widely accepted, that we're going to start to see more of those other entities of a higher frequency start to become more visible to us, because we'll have risen to the frequencies and we'll start to perceive them. Okay. Do I? Okay. Daniel says, are there more evil spirits around than before? There's no such thing as evil spirits, but there's people who decide to conduct their lives in a low frequency way. So the answer is there'll be more low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions, and possibly you might see more assassination attempts around the world. Um, maybe the assassination attempts, although they're wrong, are there's a good motive behind them, but it's not the way to do it. Basically, that's all. And Ula said, "Is Trump going to destabilize the whole world with?" Yeah, yeah. There's a couple of things going on, and you can see that part of the destabilization process also involves a certain chief executive officer and worldwide multi-billionaire who's also part of it. And I can see that millionaire, somebody called Elon Musk, becoming a president in the future. So so I can see that happening. But more importantly, before that happens, I'm starting to see the possibility of America going to war, creating a war scenario, which allows Mr. Trump to look at previous legislations that's allowed the potential to be in power for a third term. Because, if you're at war, you can say that, to maintain stability within the country, we need to, I need to stay in power, which is what happened in the Second World War. So, and that potentially could create a situation where he might try to invoke a similar direction to what Xi Jinping has done and what Putin have done, where they've created a condition where they can perpetuate their leadership because they've been in power for three or more electoral events. Okay. So, Eliza, we've got 9 minutes has happened. What about the rise of the divine feminine or the rise of women in leadership? Is there any hope there? It's all gone very, very bro. Actually, I see we should be looking at balance really, rather than going one way or the other way. I mean, we start to see a lot of what we call woke thought processes and behavioral patterns, and that's the wrong way as well. It's all about balance. The point of being in a low frequency environment where we start to see things in a linear and black and white way, yes or no, up and down, left and right, forwards and backwards, dualistic way, is because it's what we have to work with it. And so the only way to create balance in a dualistic way is to beat the middle point. So we can't have too many males governing the planet. We can't have too many females governing the planet. We can't swing one way or the other way because it creates disharmony. We have to be in the middle. And this is where the Buddhists have got the right idea, the middle road. You have to have the middle road. That creates balance. And that's an indication that they understand that that's the only way to live in a karma-free way while you're here in the physical universe. So it's an interesting thought process, but we can't swing one way or the other way. There has to be balance, and that's the most important thing. And that includes, not just gender, but gender association. We have to be recognizing that certain people have certain thought processes based upon what they've brought through from previous incarnations or what body they're expected to be in, rather than what they are in. We have to understand this, but just consider them as an individual, not as a gender, and also work with it in that way. But again, it has to be in balance. And Ulla's got another question here. Will non-violent forms of protest work on these billionaire autocrats, or are we screwed? The only way to work with these individuals is stop buying their product, and then their empire crashes. That's the best form of non-violent protest. Boycott them, and then they sit up and take notice. That's the only way, really. And if you think about it, it's economic pressures that do cause changes in conflict between different political groups, isn't it? You can see that one of the ways in which the Israelis could have been steered in a different direction was to completely sever economic ties with them, so they can't buy military weapons, they can't buy food in. They have to be self-sustaining, so they'll get to a point where they can't continue to do what they're doing. So it's what we used to do in the medieval times. We'd sort of surround a castle so no food and water can get in, and eventually the people would surrender because they're starving to death. so that's basically the only way really to move forward is to work on a non-violent way that creates a condition where they have to sort of realize that they're in the wrong, and because there's that many people start to realize that their leaders have led them astray. That's their way forward. Daniel's asked, are there more aliens coming to us? There's a plethora of groups at the moment. I'm seeing about 6 or 7 groups that are in and around the atmosphere and in this corner of the galaxy that are interested in what's going on. But clearly they're a higher frequency, and therefore we only see them when they create a condition where they can come into this frequency level and maintain their own frequency, and therefore their own connectivity with their environment, their natural environment, which is a higher frequency, and their true energetic selves as well. So it'll be frequency level 4 or 5, yes, Ola, at that level. 6 and 7, we do start to see 1 or 2, but then you start to see, and even above that, we see entities come into this environment that are not using any form of incarnation or any form of vehicle. They just create an energy field around them that allows them to maintain their own frequencies whilst being in a low frequency environment. It's like a force field for living underwater. Think of it that way. Will they reveal themselves? My understanding is that only when we show we are mature enough to become part of their collective group. And we're at a sticking point now. I mean, we've been here before several times, and the last time was basically in the Atlantean period. And there's a lot of interest as to whether we're going to totally go down the same road, or whether we're eventually going to put the brakes on and realize that we've got to start behaving ourselves, because from what we know, we don't, and from a physical scientific perspective, we don't know. We are the only civilization in the whole of not just the galaxy but the universe. It's not right, but from a scientific perspective, there's nothing that suggests otherwise. So we have to start to realize that the only way to survive is to become more mature and ensure that that we survive and not trying to make ourselves extinct. Interesting. So others said, would open ET contact change the crisis on the Earth or make us mature in a hurry? I feel that only if we have a function of higher power where all machines of war are neutralized instantaneously. And that wasn't used in anger, that was used as a function of identifying that, what you're doing is wrong, and we're going to stop you from doing it, but we're not going to stop you from living. So it's creating a show of power, but not using their ultimate power, because that then shows their maturity. So that's possible, but we have to get right to the edge of extinction. That's the issue. Daniel's asking, do I communicate with aliens? Not very often at the moment. I did quite a lot in the first part with the first book, The History of God, and I have the odd communication with them when I go to Greece, but they're the Greek ones, the ones that sort of live in Greece to understand how thought processes have changed over the generations. But in essence, if I wanted to, I could, and I can perceive them now around. Although it's dark here now, I know that there's several craft in the stratospheric levels sort of hovering over the UK right now. So I know that they're there. I can feel their presence. I don't need to communicate with them. When you know something's there, you don't pay attention to it. It's a bit like living by the sea. People say, "Oh, if I live by the sea, I'll be going in the sea every day and swimming." Actually, it becomes part of the background. And so when you know something's there, you don't pay too much attention because you're getting on with what you've got to get on with. And that instance is doing this work for me. Okay, we've got 1 minute and 25 seconds. Let's see if there's anything else that people have asked previously that I'll need to work on a bit more. No, I think we'll leave it at that. I think what we'll do is we'll leave it at that, and say that please, 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 everybody, be a good example. Show how to live, how to think, behave, and act, how to be a concerned, caring, service-based individual who's thinking of how their thoughts, behaviors, and actions not only affect themselves, but affect their environment and the individuals within the environment and the circumstances they create. And that will hopefully increase the frequencies around the people around us, because it will happen. We do make a difference. We do make a difference, no matter how small it is. Much love to you all. Namaste to you all. Looking forward to working with you in February.
Welcome to this meditation side of the World Satsanga on the 15th of January 2025. And as the lecture was on blending in, let's have a meditation on blending in and maintaining our own frequency at the same time. So let's adopt our normal posture, being in a straight backed chair with our back straight and our neck aligned with our back and our feet flat on the ground, our hands palm uppermost on our upper thighs, and our closed eye vision gently focused on the origin of the spiritual or third eye, which is in between the eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. And if you prefer to be sitting down, try to sit down cross-legged, or kneeling if you prefer to have the Zen method of meditation. That's fine. You can have just cross-legged or full lotus or half lotus, depending upon how flexible you are. And let's just focus gently on this origin of the third eye. And what I want you to do is just feel your frequential state as it is at the moment. Recognize how you think, behave, and act. How you consider the events and the circumstances and the interaction with others as they happen around you. And how you don't get pulled into arguments, how you don't instantaneously respond. You always give yourself time to give the considered and therefore the correct and therefore the efficient response to any questions or interactions you may have with others. And also feel how calm you feel and therefore how confident you feel. Feel that confidence, feel that calmness, feel the joy associated with your state of high frequency beingness. Now I want you to just visualize or mentally state, using your mentally spoken words. That's like speaking to yourself physically, but just in your mind, that you're going to create a bubble around you. Just create this bubble. And then mentally state this bubble is going to maintain your frequency. Inside the bubble is your high frequency. Outside the bubble is the frequency of the environment that you're in and those frequencies associated with the individuals you interact with and the collective frequencies of those individuals in the circumstances they're interacting and creating and the environments that they're in and that you're in. So you're protected. Now I want you to focus on being confident in yourself and your thought processes, your behaviours and your actions, and that they are correct. You can always improve them, of course, but right now they're what they are. You're on your own pathway to enlightenment, to self-realization, to ascension, to increasing your frequencies. So just recognize what you do to maintain that. Giving the considered response, giving yourself time to think about what you're going to say, how you interact with others, feeling into them, understanding where they're coming from and how you might interact with them in an efficient way that doesn't include the potential to accrue karma. And also that in any environment that you're in, you feel that you're supposed to be there. You don't stand out. You don't look out of place. You don't look as if you shouldn't be there. You're not frightened about being there. You are part of the background. Now visualize or state with your mentally spoken words a circumstance or environment that you usually don't like going into, because those individuals who are incarnating in that particular environment aren't on your level, so to speak, your frequential level. They're very immersed in their incarnation. They may be selfish, they may be arrogant, they may be angry, they may be self-supporting, they may only be interested in their own existence. And then see yourself just walking in there and projecting outside of your bubble this feeling that you're supposed to be there. That you're part of the environment. You're part of the background. That if there was a piano playing or a piano player playing a piano, that it wouldn't stop playing when you walked into the room. You walk in and you're not noticeable because you're creating a condition where your interactive frequencies outside of the bubble are on the same level as those in the environments that you're entering into. You're part of it. You are of it. Temporarily. But by being of it, you're not truly of it. You're just being part of the background. You're in the physical, you're in this environment, but you're not of it totality. You're just temporarily interacting with it. Now look at or visualize or mentally state how you would interact with these individuals. Feel into them. How would they respond to you? How would you respond to them? The best thing to do is be courteous. Not overtly courteous, because that is drawing attention to yourself, but you're courteous enough for them to disregard your presence as being not important or not an issue, or not invading their space or interrupting their thought processes. You're just there being part of the environment, being part of the background. Every now and then I try this out for real. I go into a shop, for example, and I decide I'm going to be part of the background, and I don't get served. People get served in front of me and all around me, but I don't get served. And then when I decide to become visible, then they start to serve me. So just try it a few times. Just see if you can make yourself invisible by blending into the background, saying that you're part of the background, but you're not part of the foreground. Just see how that feels. When you're doing this, you're blending in, you're interacting with people who are a lower frequency than yourself, and you're doing it with the correct level of courtesy, they interact with you temporarily and then they go away. And you won't feel any fear, you won't feel any concern, you won't feel any worry, because you're just part of the background. You've blended in. And as with my example in India, 10 years ago, you can go in any part of the world with any level of gross physicality and nobody will notice you're there because you're part of the background. Just feel what it's like to be your own high frequency within this bubble, and then the outside of the bubble is interacting with the frequencies around the location that you're in and the individuals in those environments that or locations that you're in, and the circumstances that they're creating and interacting with, and that you're just inconsequential. Just sink into it for a moment and feel that you're there, but you're not there. You're in the physical, interacting with the physical, temporarily of the physical, but not truly of the physical. You're just creating an interface, a translationary interface between the frequencies of those around you in the locations that you're in and your own frequencies. One that doesn't create friction. It's a neutral frequency that draws no attention to yourselves. Just feel that you should be there. You're part of the background. Okay, you can practice this as long as you want, for as long and as often as you want to. But right now, let's slowly come back into the room where we are. Slowly open our eyes. And if you've got some water or any other liquid around you, tea or coffee for instance, take a drink of that and it'll help to ground you. Well, thank you for participating in this World Satsanga. And I'll send you much love and namaste and look forward to working with you all in February. Did you see the aliens in Crete?